Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 12th Annual Peonies Celebration. My name is George Gumina, and I'm president of the Friends of the Rockefeller State Park Preserve. As you know, because of COVID-19, we're having to do this event virtually. It is wonderful that all of you are here to support us in the preserve. The preserve depends on your help and your donations to help renovate carriage roads, to help clear trees that have fallen so people could still walk on them, and to plan educational programs for school children and a variety of other educational programs. I started the Friends Group 23 years ago in memory of my Aunt Peggy, my Uncle David Rockefeller's wife, to help preserve and maintain these carriage roads that were recently designated to the National Historic Registry. The roads were laid out lovingly by John D. Rockefeller Sr. and his son John D. Rockefeller Jr. in the first half of the 20th century. And as soon as they were finished, the roads were open to the public. These roads are truly the artery and veins of this preserve. Designed to complement the landscape, the over 55 miles of carriage roads are wide and inviting, as most of you know. The roads are very popular for walking, jogging, horseback riding, carriage driving. These roads lead the park users through a variety of landscapes around Swan Lake, over the Pecanico River, on wood and stone bridges, by streams, fieldstone walls, and rock outcroppings. The network is one of only two in the country. The other one is in Arcadia National Park in Maine, which was also designed by John D. Rockefeller Jr. Many of these roads lead to a distinct aspect of the preserve, the Peonies garden. And now I'd like to turn the program over to our Vice President, Evelyn Haddad, who will continue telling the story of how these beautiful tree peonies came to our garden.
Thank you, George. After 9/11, the countries of the world were united in grieving with the United States over their loss. The United States itself was united, so different from today. But it was in that spirit of unity and friendship that a modest town, Yashuko-cho, in Shimane Prefecture in Japan, decided to send a gift. They wanted to give the United States a gift to show their grieving. Their most precious possession were tree peony plants that they had raised not for a couple of years, but for centuries. The plants were like their children. What better gift to give? They contacted Tsutomu Kirino, the executive director of the Japanese Chamber of Commerce and Industry of New York, because he had come from Shimane Prefecture. They wanted to give 1,000 plants, and they needed him to advise them on where to send them. He immediately said that the Brooklyn Botanic Garden would love to have 500, but where to send the remaining 500? At the time, I was the Director of External Affairs for the Japanese Chamber, and I was also the founding board member for the Friends of the Rockefeller Preserve. So I suggested that the Rockefeller Preserve could be a very worthy recipient. Tsutomu agreed and asked me to make the arrangements. I had to contact John Middlebrooks, who was then the current preserve manager, to see if the state would be willing to accept this gift. He was so enthusiastic and said, yes, of course. And he said, you know, perhaps it could be a catalyst for finishing the development of the courtyard, which the state had had to stop because they had run out of money. He suggested that maybe the Friends could undertake that mission. I then went to George Gumina, who you heard from just before. He was the founder of the Friends organization. I asked him if he would like the idea of this gift and would the Friends be willing to accept completing the courtyard. He readily agreed, and so the plan was set in motion. The peonies were shipped and were set to land at a port in California and then travel by truck. However, a sad event unfolded. A dock strike broke out at the port, and no cargo was being unloaded, let alone our precious peonies. The dock strike went on for weeks, and the peonies languished. Eventually, it was settled. The crates were loaded onto trucks and sent to the Rockefeller Preserve. Unfortunately, the news when we opened the crates was sorrowful. All of the peonies had shriveled and died. Everyone felt miserable. We had been so excited about this project. The people of Shimane Prefecture, bless their dear hearts, and reflecting on their generosity and kind spirit, which is innate to the Japanese people, said that they had decided they would send a second shipment. The first shipment had been 5-year-old plants. This time it would be 3-year-old plants, younger children. Then the ship sailed, the crates arrived, we were all excited opening them up, the plants were healthy, and we knew that we were going to have a beautiful garden. The people of Shimane Prefecture went even further. They sent over a group of gardeners to help advise our preserve staff on how to plant and care for the plants afterward. And George, dear George, our founding Friends president, under his expert leadership, he raised $100,000 to complete the development of the courtyard. So what had been a pile of rocks, really, was transformed into a slate walkway with benches for reading and relaxing. The peonies bloom in spring, signaling a renewal of life. And yet, the life of the peony bloom itself is relatively short, 2 to 3 weeks, with vibrant and vivid colors. The lesson I take from that is that you should cherish your life and make each and every moment count. After 9/11, people had to have a renewal of hope. They had to have time to begin anew, and they had to pause and express wonder and amazement and appreciation for the fact that we still have all this beauty around us. And now, beauty being around us, we are fortunate that we have a photography exhibit by a skilled photographer, Maureen Koeppel. The background music is by the Irish singing star Anya. The video showcases the peonies that bloomed last spring while we were all in the middle of the pandemic, and they offered a lot of comfort and solace to the people who viewed them. It was just what the people of Shimane Prefecture wanted.
Who can say where the road goes, where the day flows, only time? And who can say if your love grows
That was really beautiful, and I'm sure we all agree that the peonies are beautiful, and we hope that you're all enjoying them this year too. One of the high points of our program tonight is our troupe of gardeners, led by Keith Austin, Chris Davies, and Joanne Stern. Keith started here in the garden in 2004, just a couple of years after the peonies were planted. He was soon joined by Chris and Joanne. They have a font of knowledge, not only about the peonies, but about gardening. So you're welcome to take notes because the information they provide can apply to your own garden. Keith?
Good morning. We're here at the entrance to the Rockefeller State Park Preserve and its associated gardens. My name is Keith Austin. With Chris Davies and Joanne Stern, we coordinate the volunteer gardening program here at the Visitor Center. You'll meet Chris and Joanne and some of the other volunteers a bit later. We're here today to talk a little bit about the garden, the plants we have, how we care for them, a little bit of their history. Many years ago, T.S. Eliot famously wrote that April is the cruelest month, but I think personally that it's March. When we were here 6 weeks ago, we were standing in 15 inches of snow, and in about 2 weeks from now, as far as you can see, your eyes will be full of nothing but peonies in full bloom. That's just absolutely a miracle. The plants were put in the ground in December of 2002. I started here working with them in 2004. The main feature of this garden are the tree peonies. They were a gift of the Shimane prefecture in Japan as a memorial to the 9/11 experience. So immediately after the donation of this gift, the Friends of the Rockefeller Preserve got together, raised money, and had an architect come in and did a fabulous job of designing this garden that you see now. The peonies basically are two major kinds. There are about 40 species, but there are two major kinds. But they have some things in common. And one of the first things they have in common is they like well-drained soil. And that's one of the things that the Friends investment did, was to prepare a beautiful soil base for these plants. With well-drained soil, these plants can last 100 years. In wet soil, they will die very, very quickly. They also have another great feature, which is deer resistant. There are deer all over this place, and they never get nibbled, which is a very, very nice feature as well. There are basically two major classes or categories of peonies. The first is the one which most people know about, which are called herbaceous, or Peony electifolia. These are the ones you have at home. Every fall they die back to the ground. You cut back the foliage. Every spring they come back up. They're basically a perennial, and the care of them is rather simple. Literally, you just feed them a couple of times a year, cut back the bad foliage, and then the one thing you really need to do with them is to stake them, because they will produce a blossom which is perhaps 4 to 8 inches, but it's on a very weak stem because it's fresh growth, and if you don't, they'll just flop over, especially if it's raining. So you need to do that. One of the most beautiful things going is visualize your dining room table with a cut glass bowl and the peony blossom floating in it at dinner time, and it's just great romantic kind of a thing. The second kind of peony, of course, are the ones we have here, which are called tree peonies, Peony suffolcosa, and these are a different animal entirely. Herbaceous peonies are propagated by simply a division of the root structure, and then you replant that division. Tree peonies are a total and opposite thing. They are a woody shrub. You do not cut them back to the ground. You keep them as they are. All we do every year is every spring we cut off dead wood, and otherwise make sure that the plants are pruned so as to encourage air circulation and so on. Propagation of tree peonies is totally unlike herbaceous. These particular ones that came from Japan were propagated by grafting, and in that particular case what they would do is take a cutting like about this big from a plant which is healthy in the fall, when it starts to set its buds for the next spring. And you get a cutting which has 2 or 3 buds on it, cut it off, put a slice in the bottom, and then you graft it into a piece of rootstock from a herbaceous peony. And then you put it in the ground and you wait for 2 years. And with a 70% probability, you'll get a tree peony. Now, the reason you want to do this is because you want to get exactly the same kind of peony as you had before. These things will all reproduce with seeds, but with the insects flying around and cross-pollinating, you have no idea what you're going to get. And so division or grafting are the ways in which you want to propagate peonies if you want to keep the kind of thing you have. Way back in there is Linda, and Linda is cutting out dead wood from these red twig dogwoods, which are right behind me, and also the Ilex glabra compact, the green ones. And she's cutting out the dead wood. Every year there's dead wood after every winter between the cold and the aging, the impact of the snow blowers clearing snow off this place. So every year we're doing a lot of pruning of dead wood out of all of our plants. Right behind me up here is a beautiful ornamental tree called an amelanchier. Amelanchier is a bloom, as you can see, it blooms now. It also will lose its leaves fairly early in the fall, which is quite a shame. They're quite lovely, but it's a shame that they lose them so early. But it has a very nice open architecture to it, and it allows filtered light, and that is very nice for peonies because one of the things they do like to have is a little bit of shade. It protects the blossoms from being drained out by exposure to the sun. I mentioned herbaceous peonies need to be staked. Tree peonies do not need to be staked because they grow on this big woody stem. And unless the stem grows sideways, and when it grows sideways, we cut them off simply because they'll break off. The blossoms on a tree peony are 8 to 12 inches. So in a good rainstorm, they are susceptible to damage. Otherwise, come the first week in May, and we will be having a spectacular display here and it depends on the weather. A heavy thunderstorm can wipe us out. On the other hand, a nice 2 weeks worth of relatively dry thing, and we're in great shape. So care of tree peonies, it consists of, major point is pruning. We have to, every spring, we go through these hundreds of plants and we cut out the dead wood. You can see examples of where we've taken off dead wood just above a bud, and sometimes it's bigger hunks and sometimes it's really big hunks, and that's why one of my tools actually is a pruning saw. Nice pruning tool, because at this point these plants are over 20 years old, and they will, in some areas the branch structure will be 1 to 2 inches, and it's too much to cut with a pair of light tools like this. So it's quite useful. The other thing we do is to cut out the inside as much as we can, and the reason for that is to improve air circulation. These plants are susceptible to botrytis, and which is a fungus, kind of like black spot, and but good air circulation helps to minimize that risk. When we do get botrytis, you take the thing and you cut it right out immediately and get rid of it. By the way, peony foliage, you never compost, you destroy it. Because it's very susceptible to carrying virus and molds and so on. Sometimes we do actually get some peonies coming from seed. Right here you see these 2 plastic cups. These are little seedlings under there, and since we're going to be mulching later today, I put those little pots down on them to protect the plants from people coming around and throwing mulch on top of them. In about 4 years, we'll see what we have. Who knows? So with that, I'd like to move into the courtyard, and we'll meet Chris and Joanne, and they'll talk about perennials.
I'm Chris Davies. I'm one member of the gardening group here. We look after the perennials as well as the peonies. The rest of us, we look after the perennials in front of the peonies. And our focus here is on making sure that we have blooms for all 3 seasons of the year. So once the peonies are done, we want to make sure we have perennials coming into bloom in the spring and all through the summer and into the fall. So all the perennials we've got in here, we've been adding to them over the years, and they're all natives. Some of them have self-seeded out of, they've suddenly appeared, like a lot of the asters, the tall asters that we've got in here. Most of those are self-seeded, which is wonderful because they're natives. In the beds here, for example, we've got foxglove, we've got coreopsis, asters, we've got goldenrod. We have a lot of plants that we've been putting in over the years, and the pollinators, the bees, love them, which is wonderful, as do the butterflies, all the other pollinators. So that's a big attraction for people to come and see all the different types of bees that we've got here. We have, somebody counted, we have over 100 different species of native bees in this area, which is wonderful. Who knew we had that many native bees? And they all love the flowers, and as I said, we try to make sure we have flowers all through the seasons, especially in the fall, so that the bees and the pollinators can really stoke up on their food before they go into hibernation over the winter. Some of the plants that we have not only have flowers on them, but they're also very aromatic. Mountain mint is a prime example of, as you brush your hands through it, you release this gorgeous aromatic minty smell. We love it, as do the pollinators, which is part of the reason why we have it. And we also, a few years ago, we planted daffodil bulbs, and they're doing beautifully, as you can see on both sides now, and across the road. So that's also a lovely harbinger for spring. I actually started volunteering here when I retired. That was back in the summer, end of summer 2007. And I remember actually there was a group of volunteers, Keith was one of them, sitting on that bench there as I was walking by. And I heard somebody saying, it's so difficult to find people who want to volunteer and weed. And I literally stopped, raised my hand, walked backwards and said, you want somebody to volunteer to weed? I'm a weedaholic. That was a start. The other thing also, while I got your attention, the gardening group is always looking for volunteers to help. We have some major projects that we do through the year: fertilizing, spring cleanup, fall cleanup, mulching, weeding, as well as general maintenance. I said fertilizing, yeah. So we're always looking for volunteers who are willing to come and help out anytime. And it's also a good opportunity to learn a lot of things about natives, about what's a weed and what's not a weed, and gardening in general, and just getting out in the country. Plus, it's the best volunteer job anybody could take, because the visitors here are so appreciative. They'll stop and say thank you and comment on how lovely the gardens are looking. It's the best job ever. It really is.
Thank you, Keith, Joanne, and Chris, and all the people who help you. We are now deeply honored to introduce Ambassador Motoatsu Sakurai, former Ambassador and Consul General of Japan in New York. He was the president of the board of directors of the Japanese Chamber of Commerce and Industry of New York right after these peonies were planted. He was also president and CEO at that time of Mitsubishi International Corporation. Currently, he's active in the Japan Society, where he is President Emeritus, having been the first Japanese to become president of that society. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Sakurai.
Chairman George Gumina, distinguished members and supporters of Friends of the Rockefeller State Park Preserve. After 9/11, people of the Shimane Prefecture of Japan donated 500 tree peonies to the Rockefeller State Park Preserve as a symbol of friendship and solidarity between the United States and Japan. Looking back, the relationship between the two countries was not always smooth. As you know, during the Second World War, the United States and Japan fought each other as enemies. Since then, the two countries have succeeded in mutual understanding. Japan adopted American political and economic principles such as democracy, and the free market system, and American culture such as pop music and including musicals, various kind of sports, again including baseball, football, and basketball, and American food are part of Japanese life now. Americans enjoy, on the other hand, Japanese culture, both traditional and contemporary, including Japanese food, anime, and sports, including sumo, judo, and karate. By now, people from both countries agree that the US and Japan are the two countries of important allies. The success was largely made possible by building up small steps to get to know each other in a broad range of areas. The donation of 3 peonies was one example. We Japanese are very grateful that you have spent a lot of time and efforts to make the peony garden as one of the main features of the Rockefeller State Park Preserve. 3 peonies have been historically regarded by Japanese people as a symbol of elegant and dignified women. These 3 peonies you have here came from Matsue City, the capital of Shimane Prefecture. Shimane is well known in Japan as the largest producer of the best 3 peonies. I wish peony will continue to grow for a long time to come as a symbol of US and Japan friendship. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador Sakurai. You're always so gracious. While we're working in our gardens, many times we have music to keep us company. So we thought it would be natural to have some being played for you tonight. This is a local group, Out of Isolation, playing a traditional Irish set led by Maureen Koeppel. Maureen, by the way, is an accomplished runner, having logged many miles here at the preserve. In fact, all of the musicians are either walkers or runners here at the preserve. So here is Out of Isolation.
So good morning. We're delighted to be invited for this Peony Garden event and for this weird year. We're from a large group of amateur musicians that in normal times gets together in pubs and plays weekly. But this is our first outing. For the last year we've been playing on Zoom, and this is our first outing together. So it's our first get together as a group. So we've given our group the name Out of Isolation. So let me quickly introduce the members. So on my right here we have Danny Finelli, and he's our guitar player. He's from Westchester. We have Laurie Adams on fiddle. She's the only member from Connecticut, so thanks for joining us this morning. Myself, Joe Connolly, I'm from Westchester also. And then we have Maureen Carson, who's on the fiddle, also from Westchester, and Patty McHugh. And then finally, Dennis Dillon, who's a long-time permanent resident of Westchester. So without further ado, we're going to play a few tunes. The first one is called The Butterfly. All of the tunes are somewhat related to nature. We thought that was appropriate. And that's not difficult because a lot of Irish tunes are tied to nature, or they have names linked to nature. The first one is The Butterfly, and then we go into the Fox Hunters, which is also a more lively tune. And then we'll finish finally with a tune called The Lark in the Morning. So without further ado, we'll give it a go.
Thank you, Maureen and company. That was marvelous. And I say that being totally objective, even though I'm primarily Irish American. Well, we're having such a good time, and yet there's still more. The preserve literally runs on the work and inspiration of our preserve manager, Peter Iskenderian, and his loyal group of employees. They are constantly multitasking and improving to address the needs of the park visitors and the preserve itself. COVID threw us all a curveball in how we had to adjust to a new reality. Peter and his staff have been adjusting and constantly adapting ever since. But I'd like him to tell you more about what they do. Here's Peter, our preserve manager.
The preserve has been a great place for people coming during COVID to bring their kids and just to get out in nature and enjoy the sounds of nature and come to some of our programs. It's been great to have the hospital workers be able to come here. We have Phelps Hospital right up the road, and they've been coming here after work and hiking and just relieving all the stress they have all day working at the hospital. They can come here and just let all that free and enjoy nature. So that's been great. We've been hearing so many thank yous from people. That's been the greatest joy of all, being able to hear the thank yous from people. So we have a big project coming up at the end of spring and summer. It'll be starting. It's the rehabilitation of the Brothers Path carriage road, which we're standing on right now. It's the carriage road that goes around the lake, and it's basically the gateway to the preserve and most heavily used by the public. It's in need of a lot of repair. It gets overused, and it'll be great to be able to do that. We did get a matching grant from the Friends, which is fabulous. And this is where the money goes from events like the Peony celebration and other programs like that. We have a great group of volunteers that takes care of the peony garden. We couldn't do it without them. We just don't have the staff. They're such a dedicated group, and you can see by the year after year how the peonies improve. They were here this morning doing the mulching of the garden, which absolutely has to be done in order to get such a big output of flowers from the peony trees. I want to thank everybody for coming to the preserve and all the support and thank yous we've been getting this past year. Please consider supporting the Friends and all the projects they do in the preserve, like the Brothers Path Project and the Peony Garden. And thank you again for all your support.
Thank you, Peter. You didn't disappoint. And thank you again for all your hard work.
And now it's time to say farewell, and we thank you all for coming and donating to this preserve. Your support means everything to us. The Rockefeller family donated this land to the state of New York, but it's you, the people, that keep this preserve running. So we hope to see you soon on these carriage roads. God bless you and Godspeed.